about, well, why don't we start with the appearances, Justin? Tell us about these appearances. Let's find out where Bart agrees or disagrees with you concerning the nature of them and what was reported, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. I think here's a way to think about the appearances. I love Acts 17. I'm sure Bart loves this chapter, and one of my favorite chapters maybe in the entire New Testament, where Paul goes to Athens and he's preaching on the Areopagus. But before that, it actually says that Paul was interacting daily with those who happened to be there in the marketplace and on the streets. And so here Paul's a street preacher, and I just love the idea of him engaging with pagans. And I like to imagine, how did Paul engage with them? What was the content? We're not told the content of those conversations. And so I like to think, in light of the appearances, I think the appearances probably would have been one of the things that he would have presented to a pagan as evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. He probably would have said something like, hey, Jesus appeared to me and I hated him. I believed he was cursed of God on the cross. I believed that, he needed to be, his movement needed to be wiped out. I was on my way to arrest Christians, and ultimately he appeared to me and he loved me and he forgave me and he can forgive you. And then maybe the pagan was kind of like a Bart Ehrman skeptic and said something like, oh, well, why should I believe you, Paul? And Paul said, well, what about Peter? Peter was his chief disciple, and Jesus appeared to him. I can introduce you to him. And what about James, his brother? And what about a group of disciples that ultimately were with Jesus for 3 years, that he appeared to them multiple times? And also 500 people even Jesus appeared to at one time. And hundreds of them, I met many of them, hundreds of them are still alive. And you can go and investigate and talk to them about what it was like to see Jesus. I mean, I like to just imagine that it was something like that. But, I find that compelling, and I think that, that kind of layout is what Luke means in the beginning of Acts when he refers to the convincing proofs. He says there were these convincing proofs, tekmerios, this great Greek word that was used for irrefutable statements in rhetorical Greek documents. And these convincing proofs were probably the appearances, and I think that really has been
and to that extent,
that's been what's been convincing to Christians throughout the last 2,000 years.
And your contention is that most New Testament historians, be they Christian or not, agree that these claims happened, that people said that they had seen the risen Jesus or met the risen Jesus.
Well, yeah, let me get specific, because I get specific in the book. So there's actually, by my count, 13 appearances of Jesus, 4 individual appearances to individuals, and 9 to groups, 9 groups. But 4 of those, the 4 individuals, that's the ones probably we'll discuss here. The 4 individuals are the ones that are pretty much bedrock. Virtually all will accept that Jesus appeared to, or Peter believed Jesus appeared to him. James, the brother of Jesus, believed he appeared to him. Paul obviously believed he appeared to him. And then we can bring in Mary Magdalene, because I'm pretty sure Bart, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but believes Mary Magdalene also had that experience. She's accounted for in all 4 Gospels, being the first to actually witness the risen Jesus. So those 4 would be kind of the bedrock eyewitnesses.
Well, why don't we stick with those specific ones and get your take on that, Bart? To what degree do you agree that at least people claimed to have seen the risen Jesus?
I think it's probably right. I mean, Paul certainly. Paul tells us that he did. The problem with these others, of course, is they don't tell us that. So we don't have, Peter didn't leave us writings where he said, I saw Jesus. James didn't leave us writings. We don't know who the 500 were, none of this. So what historians tend to do, of course, is to examine their sources of information. And the most important thing is to know what the sources are, to determine whether they are reliable or not, and to see what they say. I mean, so we infer that I think that Peter probably did say that he saw Jesus, and I think James probably did. I don't know about the 500. They come out of nowhere in 1 Corinthians 15. There's no
Mary Magdalene?
Well, we don't have anything from her either, obviously.
I know, but do you believe that she had an experience?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
And I believe that in a lot of religious traditions, you get reports like that. And so my issue with this kind of bedrock thing is whether it's appropriate to consider these kinds of claims outside of other claims for other religious figures. Do we treat them equally, or do we provide a kind of do we say, well, it's more likely true because it's in the Bible, and less likely true if it's in the Mormon tradition, or if it's in the Muslim tradition, or if it's in ancient Greek and Roman mythology, or not just mythology, ancient Greek and Roman history. And so do you give equal weight to everything? And if so, then why is it that you prefer these witnesses to the others?
Yeah.
Justin.
Great question. What is the evidence? So my question would be, what is the evidence? You brought up Islam, you brought up Mormonism. Well, in Islam, this only supernatural really claim is to Muhammad. It's one eyewitness. And I agree with Deuteronomy. We shouldn't trust anything unless it's at least 2 or 3 witnesses. So we have 4 that you agree with. In Christianity, when it comes to Mormonism, again, Joseph Smith is the only person to say that Moroni appeared to him, and he says Jesus and God the Father and a lot of other strange
So
things.
I'm not sure, Justin,
But
if
only
he's-
one person, only one eyewitness in both those cases, both those religions you brought up. But I'd like to hear the evidence.
Well,
for
I
the
don't,
Greek
I don't
and
know.
Roman.
I don't know if you've studied Mormonism very much.
Oh, I've studied a lot.
There are 11 eyewitnesses, and they
To
all
the golden plates.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're
Yes.
going to compare
And that
golden plates to the
4
resurrection of Jesus?
No, I'm just saying if you're a historian,
Yeah.
and what you're doing is you're saying we're going to trust eyewitnesses.
Okay, I'm fine with them seeing golden plates. But what does that tell
4
us?
of them